So I'm not gonna lie to you guys, the trailers for this movie actually hyped me up, because for every bad trailer that they had, it seemed like they had 2 more great trailers with the Led Zeppelin music. It was just that awesome to me. And I got kind of hyped for it because growing up, I was a big fan of King Arthur and the classic books and novels and legends. That stuff just blew my mind as a kid. And it still kind of does and sticks with me for a reason, so I'm always kind of interested to see what a director and a studio have to continue to bring this classic story to life in a different way. And with somebody like Guy Ritchie behind the camera, I'm all ears. What's up guys, I'm Jacob Suggs, and welcome back to a really quick review of a movie that I literally just finished watching. Nobody asked for a reboot of King Arthur. Nobody was hyped for this movie, probably except for me. And then again, I kind of knew what I was getting into, and I was kind of cautiously optimistic going into the movie, because I did see that it has a 28 on Rotten Tomatoes, which it is not very good, but I give every movie a fair chance. So I sat down, I watched this movie, and I actually kind of thought it was okay. It doesn't stick with me, it's a little bit forgettable, but for what it is, it's not that bad. So I'm going to start out with what I liked about this movie. First off, the performances in this movie are actually really good for the most part. Although the side characters are really forgettable for the most part, I would say that Charlie Hunnam does a great job as Arthur in this movie. The emotion is really well conveyed out of his performance, and he was really the only protagonist that I cared about. But it's his movie, it's King Arthur, so I'm kind of okay with that, but at the same time I wish that, you know, his merry band of allies were developed a little bit more. And Jude Law is the villain. First off, anytime you have Jude Law in a movie, I'm all ears because he's a really great actor and one of my personal favorites. And you're not really making a mistake by casting him as a villain, because he was incredibly menacing in this movie and frightening, and really did what he had to do in a really effective way. And this movie's visual style, you kind of know what you're getting because it's a Guy Ritchie movie. He has a really cool style of doing really fast cuts and rewinding footage, and if you've seen Sherlock Holmes, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That's what Guy Ritchie does best. He does a really good job directing movies, and he reminds me a lot of Zack Snyder in some ways, although I think that both of them are very different directors in numerous different ways, but when it comes to, you know, visually telling a story, they're kind of the same. And finally, I thought this movie's soundtrack was really great. I thought that the soundtrack really fit well with the film, though if the movie did use more rock, I wouldn't have been opposed to it. Unfortunately, what bogs down this movie and what makes it just okay is the lack of narrative and the editing. The editing in this movie, I kid you not, is this movie's best ally, but also its worst enemy. At some points in this movie, the editing is spot on and the action scenes look fantastic, and the shots that aren't action scenes look really great too. But unfortunately, there are moments to where storytelling bits are told here, there, and yonder, and they're just kind of spliced together, and unfortunately, the editing messes with the narrative, and that's never a good sign. Like, for example, you might have dialogue between 2 characters, and then it'll switch to an action scene for like a brief second, and then the dialogue again. I kid you not, it reminded me of Suicide Squad. Although I personally like that movie, the editing was rough in that movie, and it kind of reminded me of the same thing here. So I guess you could say this movie is visually great, but narratively, it's really slow, generic, and painfully mediocre. And that's a shame, because I look forward to seeing these types of movies, and I always expect that I'm gonna be the only one that really likes them in the midst of all of this negative hate. But unfortunately, I can totally see where the critics are coming from and why this movie did really bad at the box office. And I like Guy Ritchie. I hate to do this to the guy. I don't think this movie sucked. I thought it was just kind of okay, but Just because I like a director doesn't mean that I'm gonna like every single thing they put out. Now, this movie wants to take this classic story and make it more modern for audiences today. In some areas, that absolutely works. In some areas, it absolutely fails. Not to mention that because the narrative is lacking, the characters are lacking, the pacing's a little bit off, and the tones are a little bit off too. That's a big problem. And it's a shame, like I said, because I really wanted to like this movie, and there are a lot of elements that I like in this movie, especially the third act, which had a twist that I did not see coming and I thought was brilliant. Then again though, my dad, who I watched it with, saw it coming a mile away, so maybe I'm just totally oblivious to movies in some parts. But just because a movie has a really great third act does not mean that the first and second act can be entirely made up for that. The first act and second act of this movie are kind of boring and really generic. And the effects in this movie are really hit and miss too. In some areas they look fantastic, especially in the final fight, but they do that really cheesy thing that I hate, that kind of like these sort of movies do, like Warcraft and stuff like this, to where the hero grabs like a blade, or in this case Excalibur, and Arthur's eyes like light up and there's like blue steam coming out of the sword. That would be cool if I haven't seen it 1,000 times before. Unfortunately I have, and it's included in a fight scene that looks like something out of a PlayStation 3 game. Yeah, it's just really hit or miss with these graphics. I mean CGI. But the effects in the final battle are fantastic, and the final act of this movie is actually really, really good. And if the rest of the movie would have been like that, it would have been great, or at least memorable. It's not though. The movie shows you some of the same scenes over and over and over again, and we kind of get the point. We know something's gonna come out of that. See, so why do you have to show it to us a bajillion times? Short answer, you don't, and you're just wasting screen time, and you could have put in more action and narrative and character development in that wasted screen time that you don't have anymore. I'm not Guy Ritchie, I'm not a studio, so it's not my movie, but at the end of the day, I can critique a movie and tell you why I did or did not like a movie. In this case, I thought it was just okay. Not to mention that the titles in this movie, when it's like, you know, listing the names, like the casting and directed and produced, it looks like something out of iMovie. It looks that bad. Overall, I just thought this movie was okay. Nothing really stood out to me about it, but if it did come on cable one day and I was bored, I'd probably watch it again. So if you're a really big King Arthur fan out there, and you really wanted to see this movie and didn't have a chance to watch it, I'd say to you, you might find some enjoyment out of this. If you're not, and you're looking for a movie to watch one night, I don't know if I can recommend this one to you. But overall, I'd give this movie probably like a 6.5. I thought it was okay. The final fight in the third act is great, but that doesn't change the fact that the first two aren't. So that's my thoughts. So have you seen King Arthur Legend of the Sword? What did you think about it? Let me know down in the comments below. And as always, I'm Frame by Frame. Remember the name. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye guys.